Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach all men how to spin clouds of gloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at our rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, nightingale.
This is Nayaswami Bharat, and the talk this morning will be given by Badri Matlock. So we'll begin this portion by reading from Rays of the One Light, which are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Ananda. This week is How High Should We Aspire? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The passage this week is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and pharaohs, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. The easiest explanation for these words is that they were spoken in criticism of the scribes and Pharisees, particularly since Jesus was often verbally attacked by them and stood up to them fearlessly. However, it wouldn't have been much of a challenge to the disciples who aspired to spiritual perfection to tell them, don't be like those who lack any such aspiration. Jesus, in fact, says only a few verses later, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. What Jesus was referring to here then was the self-righteousness of the priests. Don't seek perfection, he was saying to his disciples, in the image you project toward others. Don't be satisfied with a goodness born merely of ego definitions. The highest virtue is to transcend the very thought of personal virtue in the realization of God alone as the doer. Before this realization, even the thought, I am kind, or I am truthful, is limiting. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 7th chapter, "Yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, that man who saith, all is Vasudev." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. As Ananda said, my name is Badri, and I'd like to also welcome you to Sunday service this morning. And just as I often reflect, what a tremendous blessing it is to share the spiritual path together in divine friendship and seeking. We'll start with the reading here from Whispers from Eternity, Paramahansa Yogananda's beautiful book of prayers. O King of all our ambitions, open the door of noble aspirations in the mansion of our souls. Open our heart bud to thy love, and let the fragrance of our love escape its prison of ego to merge in thee. On winds of cosmic perception, may our fragrance be swept to thy temple of infinity. O King of all true ambition, throw open wide thy windows everywhere, in the red cloud at sunset, in the rosy, glad clouds at dawn, in every charm-clad dream of human hopes. Open the doors of all noble aspirations that lead out from our ego mansions onto the vast panorama of thy bliss. Let our fragrance blow with thy breath, reminding all nature of thine unseen presence. It's beautiful. So our topic this morning, how high should we aspire? And this interesting reading from the Bible about our righteousness, our goodness exceeding that of the scribes and the Pharisees. And, reflecting on this, as Swami writes in the reading, how laudable is it to exceed the righteousness of these kind of bandits and thieves, if not all that bad. But, what is righteousness? We think of the virtues of the goodness of righteousness. But for the devotee, for the yogi, it's more than that. It's more than just right action, as much as it is action that which takes us to God and leads to our own inner freedom. So this would be a more true and deeper meaning to the reading and to the concept of our own righteousness as yogis. If we take a simple, innately divine quality like love, and we examine where does it come from, as Swami writes in yet another of his beautiful songs, what is love? Is it only ours, or does it whisper in the flowers? Is it just a dream, or does it laugh in every stream? And the love expressed by the masters and by God that we aspire to is far greater than any human love that we can experience or that we can offer ourselves. As Swami Kriyananda once commented, looking at an image of his guru, Yogananda's guru, Sri Yukteswar, he said, "I see so much love in those eyes." And Yogananda, knowing his guru, Yukteswar, for the stern and stoic disciplinarian that he was, said with a chuckle, "There's no love in those eyes." But he could laugh at this because he knew that his guru manifested the perfect, all-consuming love of God that exceeded any element of personality, and that we, too, aspire to more than any human expression. But back to this idea of, how high should we aspire? There has to be a sort of dynamic tension in the life of the devotee. We know, obviously, we're here to aspire all the way to nothing short of God realization, but we also have to honor and work with our own present reality. It would be inauthentic to do otherwise. And to spiritual, aspirants, authenticity is everything. Sincerity is everything. And so there's sort of this, again, tension between a passive reliance on God's grace and our own divine will, our own self-will and expression. And I heard a little anecdote once that describes this point well. It's a little story about two Buddhist monks, who were out walking by the seaside. And as they were walking along, they encountered this disturbing sight. The whole beach where they were walking was just washed ashore with fish that had been carried on the beach there from a great storm. And so it was recent, and these fish, many of them lay, squirming and dying there in the sun, gasping for air. And the two monks had very different reactions. The first, in his compassion, ran out and began frantically saving the fish that were still alive, casting them back into the sea. And a few moments later, he looked up and saw his brother monk, who also in his compassion and seeing this sight, had sat down in meditation and was calmly absorbed within. And he ran to his brother monk and he said, "Help me, what are you doing? We have to save the lives of these pitiful creatures." And his brother monk said, "Look at you in your frantic attempt to rescue these creatures. You may save a few of thousands, but in my calm stillness, look what good I can do in my prayer and contemplation on life and death." And so a bit extreme, perhaps, the two sides of the coin there, but reflecting on this, I think it's actually more true, from my perspective anyhow, that it's actually the first monk who had the right approach. And of course it's going to be a blend of the two, but we have to do action, sometimes frantic action in this world. But the more we can do it, again, as a blend from a centered place, from our meditation practice, then we can go about a tremendous action in this world, saving the lives of fish or doing whatever our job or task at hand may be. But to be sure, there is a great work to do, as Kriyananda was often told by his guru. And so this is the first key to this concept of righteousness and aspiration, is that we simply have to get to work. We have to do action, and hopefully action that frees us. But in truth, energy has its own intelligence, as Swami Kriyananda often remarked. If we can put out energy in as much of a positive way as we can, it will take shape, it will take form, especially with the guidance of a true guru, to that which will free us. So right action from where we now stand, whatever that may look like. And another beautiful example from Sri Yukteswar is this timeless and peerless quote for the devotee, where he says, "The past lives of all men are dark with many shames. Everything will improve in the future if we are making spiritual effort now." So there it is, just simply make the effort. And we will find God from wherever our present reality is. Yogananda remarkably had a great sense of humor, and he would tell certain jokes, including this one about this Irish woman immigrating to the United States. And there she is with the immigration official, who opens her bag and finds a little flask there. And he says, "Well, what's this?" And she says, "Oh, it's simply water." And he opens it and says, "Irish whiskey." And she says, "Glory be to God, it's a miracle." So a little facetious maybe, but there she is bringing God into the equation. And in fact, numerous are the stories through the lives of the saints and the scriptures of true thieves, bandits, murderers who have found God, or at least who have made tremendous spiritual progress. So where are we now to say that we can't too aspire much higher from our own present state of relative goodness? I think of one of my favorite activities in the world, which is to surf. And just to be out in the ocean is a divine experience. It's a sadhana to be there in the presence of God in this immense body of water. But the actual action of surfing, and I know Swami Kriyananda who I do not think was much of a surfer, used this example a number of times. And there's a beautiful relationship with the ocean where the surfer, and this is true in many activities, but in the case of surfing, your own ability, your own intuition and skill has to be in concert with this powerful force in the ocean that, humility is required in this dance. And so a great surfer has a skill set that's honed, but far more than that, he has an intuitive relationship with the ocean, a respect with nature. And it's a beautiful dance, as Yogananda said on the spiritual path, a divine romance with God. And this is the life of the devotee. And our self-expression in surfing in the spiritual life becomes far greater and not lesser through the wisdom guidance of a guru, of a true master. And so the blessings of the guru and of God are there, to be sure, in our lives, and their grace is there. A few months ago, I was visiting my father in Costa Rica with my family, and we had the opportunity to go out on a whale watching boat. My dad organized this kind of fun tourist experience for us with the kids. And so we went out on this 20-foot or so boat at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there were 5 or 6 other passengers with us there on the boat, tourists. And we had almost immediately this blessing, kind of rare sight of this huge pod of these dolphins and a mother humpback whale and her calf. And so this was already a beautiful blessing. But as we were going out on the water that morning, I noticed in our company, the few other passengers, strangers that were there, was this woman who, she was a young mom. She had like a 9-month-old baby with her. And there she was, as she was nursing the child and holding the child, I just sort of noticed incidentally that her eyes were closed. And from years of meditation and just, being around this and practicing it, I just noted that she was in an uplifted state. She wasn't just closing her eyes. I didn't make that much of it, but I noticed that this woman was inward and she was centered. She was uplifted. And so a little while later, her baby was awake. We had seen the beautiful sea creatures, and my daughter Tulsi, who's about 5 and loves little babies and kids too, she was kind of making faces and playing with the baby, and who was right next to us. I said to Tulsi, ask, her mom what the baby's name is. And so Tulsi worked up the courage, and she said, what's your baby's name? And the mom smiled, and she said, Ananda. And my mouth, Tulsi looked at me, and my mouth must have been kind of sideways and open, and I looked at the woman, and I said something like, we're from Ananda. So here we are on this boat in Costa Rica with this baby Ananda, and it turns out Mom, and at least Mom and her partner, are Kriya Bonds. They're Kriya Yogis in the tradition of Hariharananda and Sri Yukteswar and our lineage of masters. So there's God's grace, there's God's magnetism in this remote and incredibly at odds circumstance. And such is the life of the devotee, that miracles become really quite commonplace. But again, to go back to the reading and the idea that, kindness, that goodness is basically insufficient, not insignificant, but that virtue alone is insufficient. Again, if we look at a quality like kindness, to be kind, to be good is a tremendous, aspiration and good quality. But any ego-born quality is binding to the soul. As Swami Kriyananda often remarked, good karma is still karma, and it binds us. And so far better through our goodness is to be expressing God's goodness. Better than I am kind is to express God's infinite and loving kindness towards all. There's a beautiful example from the Indian epic, the the Ramayana, and we're at the end of this incredible battle of good and evil, light and dark. Rama wins or rescues his princess, his beloved Sita. And towards the end of this, her purity, Sita's purity, is called into question. And without hesitation, she calls upon Agni, the Lord of Fire, the God of Fire, and a great fire is set ablaze. And immediately she steps into this fire and offers herself, and she's untouched. She cannot be consumed by the flames. And her goodness, her purity is proven far beyond any shadow of human goodness. She was a divine being herself and expressed that purity. And so we have to transcend even good qualities like kindness and goodness. I naturally, being a parent of young children, have at least a mild interest in different schools of thought with regard to parenting and education. And recently, some friends here at Ananda shared with me this article about the Inuit people of North America. And really interesting, again, without getting into the article in depth, was one kind of key point that was made, that essentially the Inuit adults, the people, they never get angry, or maybe it's better expressed that they never express anger. But in any case, I found it fascinating that they basically don't submit to this lower nature, but they also don't suppress it. It talks about other ways that they work with children and just with one another, but to play out anger, or again, maybe the emotions underlying anger in, I think, a healthier way. Certainly I'm no Inuit in that I never express anger and probably wouldn't survive at sub-zero temperatures. But recently my son Jay, who's 3, speaking of not expressing anger, was about just this week, it was a few days ago, was going to take a very large pair of pruning shears to the body of my truck to, I guess, do some detailing. And so I shouted, "Jay, no, stop!" And he got really sullen and he kind of hid behind the truck. And I immediately, I may never get angry, but I know when to admit I overreacted or whatever. And so I just knelt down low and I said, "Jay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. I shouldn't have raised my voice." And his expression turned and he just said, "I forgive you. You shouldn't have raised your voice." So I thought that went pretty well. But, again, being interested in this thought, there's also this train of thought in parenting that we shouldn't tell our children, "You're so good at this," or, what is it? You're so smart, or things like this. And basically, it's that we're praising them, right, for qualities that they have to develop in themselves. They have to aspire to. And well, I think there's validity in this. Naturally, I'm drawn to the philosophy of education for life of Swami Kriyananda, which, again, it's just a seminal teaching that he wrote in that book and that we employ in our school systems here. But that we can work with children in such a way as to say, not only, to go back to you're so smart, for example, the alternative approach would be to say, "You're so hardworking. You work so hard at that," which is, again, a step in the right direction to say that I'm praising you for the energy you put out to develop this quality. But better still, again, I think in education for life approach, in the development of the soul of a child, of an adult, is to say, let me instruct you, let me help facilitate and guide you in direct experience that will show you how being hardworking, how being kind will lead to your own greater happiness and freedom. And that's how God works with us. All life is like a school. All life is education and entertainment, as Yogananda said. So the train of thought that leads us towards our own highest potential. If you look not only at children, but great minds and throughout history, saints, Look at Thomas Edison. You know, the famous 40,000 experiments he went through to find the right filament for the light bulb. You know, at 20,000, his colleagues were pleading with him to stop. And was it his hardworking nature that caused him to persist to 40,000? It was his passion. It was his belief, if not stated in God, then his, awe-inspiring passion for the universe and for the beauty and just for the creativity that expresses in the divine spirit everywhere. And so this has to be our passion as devotees, is to fulfill our own highest potential in whatever it is we're doing. And so the energy, in fact, that precedes or animates our action is in actuality far more important than the action itself. Certainly we should perform good action, but more important is the energy that and the intention that goes into it. And this is, of course, born of meditation. But what this really gets down to is what's noted in the reading and what's one of the absolute gemstones of the entire spiritual path that Kriyananda and Yogananda emphasize again and again, that we see God as the doer in everything in life, through ourselves and through all human experience. God is the one doing it. And Swamiji would tell also some jokes, and on a number of occasions I heard him tell this one about this humorous incident about the Irish priest, again, the Irish, who visits the farmer, and he says, upon seeing his farm there, says, "What a fine farm you and God have created for yourself here." And the farmer responds and says, "Well, that may be so, Father, but you should have seen it when God had it all to himself." And so, as any farmer will tell you, it's a lot of hard work. And I have a number of friends who are farmers and spent a little time here farming with Ananda when I arrived. So I at least have a sense of what it takes. And, so it is, now I farm children and I farm community. I mean, so it is that the spiritual path is tremendous hard work. It's farming, it's working in concert with nature. It's putting out spades of energy to help cultivate the finer qualities in ourselves and in life. As Yogananda said, weed the garden of your life. Ananda's out there weeding forever. All of us as devotees are out there cultivating our own souls. And this is karma yoga. This is the secret of right action. And in fact, it's the other side of the coin of right action, that when we see God is doing it through us and through every circumstance of life, then everything becomes right action. It's not to say that, we're perfect in everything we do by any stretch, but it's true that the more we can bring God into it, the more God is simply there. And we learn even from our mistakes and what we might think of as wrong action in a God-moving direction. And then Swami Kriyananda gives a beautiful example, or I should say instruction, about this teaching of God as the doer. Because, yes, that's a tremendously important principle, but he also says that affirmation is not the same as wisdom. Affirmation is not the same as wisdom. To really see that God is the doer, we have to experience God more and more inside in meditation, as love, as joy, as these divine qualities. And instead of just praying to God, we have to listen. Swami says, how can we approach the holy presence of God if we do all the talking? We have to have this relationship, this divine romance with God. And as Yogananda said, meditation will support our work, and work will support our meditation. Brother Turyananda, another disciple, said, our behavior during the day makes our meditation at night. And isn't that true? That every thought, every action that we have, every intention, directly correlates, not in some nebulous way, but directly correlates to that moment every night, every morning when we sit to meditate, and we close our eyes and go within. And no wonder it's so hard to meditate. We have to work at it from both ends of the equation. But meditation is key. And if we love God, if we have devotion, if we have sustained devotion and meditation, then we truly can know God. So just to kind of bring it back, this is a supremely practical teaching. And it's what I love about the spiritual path of self-realization, is that God is the doer. Finding God in everything, in everyone, and in ourselves in meditation is a supremely practical teaching. For example, in every problem, in every obstacle, there is an exact and immediate and appropriate solution at hand, bar none. And it's not found always easily or readily or obviously, but it is absolutely there. And by there, I mean here, at the point between the eyebrows. And it's found through love. It's found through divine joy, not by meeting the problem on the level where it's at. And there's a beautiful story from the life of St. Francis of Assisi. In the year 1219, there was a battle of the Crusades at a city called Damietta. And there was a slaughter. 6,000 Christians were killed that day when they were sieging this city by the Muslims. And St. Francis was actually present with some of the brothers. And he asked to be sent to the front lines to convert the enemy by the power of love. And the general acquiesced, but warned him that his head would be on a spike by nightfall on the city gates. And St. Francis went forth, and not speaking their language, he called out, "Sultan, Sultan." And taking him for an emissary, they took him to the Muslim king. And the Muslim king actually spoke French. And so he had an audience with St. Francis. And he was an ardent follower of the Prophet Muhammad, who also deeply respected Christ. And he also observed in St. Francis his plain and deep devotion and godliness. And in seeing this, he asked St. Francis to pray for him, and he granted him a special charter for he and his brothers to travel through the Holy Land on pilgrimage, unobstructed. And meanwhile, Christian reinforcements arrived, and the Muslims and Christians began slaughtering each other anew. But how beautiful is it, and how true, that the world will go on, sometimes in slaughter, to be sure, sometimes just in the myriad of human experiences. But for the devotee, there's only love, and there's only God happening in our lives. And that is our aspiration. From whatever our present reality is, that is the pole star that will guide us if we just anchor ourselves to that reality. So, again, at once, our divinity, in the kindness, again, back to this simple quality, in the kindness that we share for God, a simple act of kindness or love is the most important thing we can do in the world, in our spiritual life. So not to lessen the divine qualities that we can express through our virtues, but as I said at the outset, what a beautiful and divine blessing to share the spiritual path, to aspire to God, to the highest within us, and to support one another in this divine romance with God. So may we all just receive and always share this blessing.